Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is just how grateful I am to be here with you. And I'm actually going to start with gratitude because I've got so many internal dialogues happening right now of, what do I want to talk about? And my topics seem to be shifting and moving and shaping. And what's funny is I actually did this topic last Friday and I walked away and I was like, nah, didn't nail it. I'm going to do it again. And, a lot of my friends, tell me just to put it up and, get on with it. But for me, I really care about the type of information and the conversation that I'm having with you in this moment. Like, it really means a lot to me. And I was just on the way here thinking, God, I'm so grateful that being here every week with you and the fact that you take the time out of your incredibly busy lifestyle and you could be listening to any other podcast in the world and you choose to be here with me, how grateful that is. And I really appreciate those of you who reach out to me, take the time to share what has resonated, what you love, what you'd like to see more of. When you've shared it with friends, family, mothers, partners, when they've reached out to me and said, oh my God, I didn't realize I needed that conversation. And so many times, like, the beautiful thing about podcasts and being exposed to so many brilliant minds on the internet is that we do get to have these conversations that we didn't know we needed. And so I'm just sitting in gratitude, and I do so many group weekly calls. I talk in so many spaces every single week. And I'm so grateful for that because I get to hear so many things that are out there in the world, and I get to then share so many things that have helped me become a better version of myself. And essentially this podcast is all about that. It's like, it is about that radical responsibility, and it is how do we learn to improve our experience of ourselves so that we can ultimately show up not just better for ourselves but the people around us. And we lead by showing, not by saying. And so I do want to start off with gratitude with you guys this morning. Sitting here every single week feels a little bit easier. And usually I'm so used to looking at faces on a screen and reading mannerisms and smiles and chuckles, and that definitely makes having a conversation with yourself a lot easier. So what I'm essentially imagining now is that you're here with me. And when I do that, I've got a big smile on my face. It automatically makes me feel like, I'm not alone, that I am having a conversation with you. And I'm really excited about this topic. It's something that I teach a lot of my clients. It's something that I practice all the time. And we just finished our 8-week reset challenge. And it started off a little bit chaotic, I will not lie. But it ended up being one of my favorite experiences. And I was just rinsing through like all of the feedback that we got from the girls. And I asked them, like, what was something that you learned about yourself, or what are you most proud of, or what is the thing that you notice about yourself that has shifted and changed since you came into this program? And a lot of it came down to this thing called radical self-acceptance, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I have pillars of self-mastery that we teach in Flex Method, and I'm going to share them with you too. But this particular pillar that I want to dissect with you today is probably the hardest one to do. But it is the one that we actually all need for change. Now, radical self-acceptance or radical self-ownership, they go hand in hand. There's layers to them. The reason it's so powerful is because when we accept who we are, we get to create the better version of who we are. So radical self-acceptance isn't that I'm accepting who I am and my circumstances and I can't do anything with it. It's actually the opposite. And I remember so much of my life before I understood why this was so powerful, before I even understood or had the language of radical self-acceptance, I spent so many years in my teens and early 20s, really wanting to be anyone but myself. I always put myself last. I was never good enough. I still have that part of me. But I would spend hours and hours and hours looking at magazines, watching fashion TV, just so upset that I wasn't that person on the screen or in the magazine, that I didn't have the perfect skin or the perfect ratios or these perfect anything. Like everyone apart from myself was perfect. Everyone. And I really crumbled in that mindset. I really suffered in my own existence, and I was a victim to my own experience. And when we sit in that space, we're very powerless. When we sit in the space of wanting to be someone other than ourselves, we're powerless, because not only are we not accepting what we have, we're also trying to create a version of ourselves, which is an imagination and a version of someone else that we want to create for ourselves, if that makes sense. And this is where a lot of women feel stuck. It's like when we see highlight reels and perfect angles and all those things on the internet, airbrush versions, which, when I was having this challenge, when I was moving through this challenge at such an early age, my mum had to take me into a photo shoot and take the photo and show what they did with the airbrushing so that I could see that this version was not the real version that we see. And I don't know if anyone remembers the Dove ad where they took the girl and then they literally showed you on the video like how they manipulated the way that the girl looked to make it this other version of this girl. And I think it was a really powerful ad. But even still, all of us know that what we see on the internet is a highlight reel. We all know that. And yet we still have moments where we compare ourselves to that. And Morgan, who was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, which if you haven't listened to, honestly is freaking brilliant. It was such a great conversation. She named something really great, which was so often when we're feeling bad about ourselves, that's when we go to look for evidence, we all do it, that we should feel bad, right? When we're feeling the worst, when we're feeling the worst of the worst, we go on the internet, we go on whether it be TikTok or Instagram, and we literally look for people's highlight reels to give us evidence of, yeah, that's why we're not good enough. And it's a toxic trait. And until we recognize that that's something that we do and that we have to practice removing ourselves from doing that, we are going to be suffering in our own existence. So it wasn't until I was about 22 or 23 that I had this epiphany on the dance floor. I was actually over in Ibiza at the time. I was traveling with my sister. I'd taken, a couple of weeks away from training, and I was just living my life at 23-year-old. And I was at this party and there were so many people coming up to me and going, "You have the best energy. You have such a nice spirit. You've got such a great energy." And I was just like, what a lovely compliment. Like, not to be complimented on what I looked like, but to be complimented on the energy that I was obviously giving out. And I was just having fun. I was with my sister, with some girlfriends, being super playful, having a good time, as you do as a 23-year-old, and as we should still do at any age. But I literally had this moment where I stopped and I'm like, why am I trying to be anyone but myself? I didn't have radical responsibility at that time. Or I did, but I didn't know. I did when I was coming out of hospital, but in certain moments, like I didn't practice it enough, not like I do now. And it was like this moment where it actually felt quite spiritual. I often talk about a lot of the things that I embody is very connecting. It feels like an embodiment. And that moment like literally changed so many things for me. Within that moment that I recognized, why do I want to be anyone but myself? I can't be anyone but myself, but I can be a better version of me. That's where I became and felt so incredibly powerful. And so many things changed. It became me versus me. So much. And while I have incredibly high standards of myself, and sometimes it's unrelenting, i.e. coming back for a second time to record a podcast so that it's better, perfect. I appreciate those parts, and sometimes it's pretty tough, right, when it's not met with compassion, and it can become self-bullying, which we all can fall in the trap of at times. That moment I really understood so much of me, and I was able to step into my power. When we radically accept ourselves, we can own who we are. We can own the parts of us that challenge us. We can own the parts of us that we want to improve on, right? Radically accepting ourselves is not, this is who I am and I can't change. Right? That's a fixed mindset. We can talk a little bit about that later too. But it is radically accepting that you can't put your head on another body. You can't put another head on your body. You can't change your hands. You can make them look better. Right? We can evolve parts of us. In fact, we should. We can grow our muscle. We can create our shape. We can become strong. We can become fast. We can build, make babies. We can do all these incredibly amazing things. But we can't be someone else. And we can be inspired by others. In fact, I honestly, a beautiful thing is to be inspired by others. When we look at the Me Too movement, there's a positive and a negative to it. The negative is, and the fixed mindset of that is, if I can't do it, neither can they. If I can't get lean naturally, well, that person who's lean, it must be on steroids. Like, that's a very fixed mindset, and that's a very, if I can't do it, neither can you. The positive of the Me Too movement is, if she can do it, I can. If I can do it, you can. Right? So there's a growth and a fixed mindset on both of those things, and there's a positive and a negative to the Me Too movement. But I think it's so beautiful to be inspired by others. That allows us to keep growing to be a better version of who we are, right? To be able to learn that radical self-acceptance is owning who we are, all the parts of us, the parts that we love, that we want to keep strengthening, the parts that challenge us, that we want to keep learning about, that we want to stay curious about, that we want to ask, hey, what do you need from me right now? What's going to help you feel safe, connected, lower the volume? Right? That's a beautiful thing. That's where we can fully grow. But it is not accepting that we are fatally flawed and that we can't change and that no one can help us. That's victimizing. That's not radical self-acceptance, right? And so I'm going to share with you a quote that I love from Jimmy Carr. And if you don't know who Jimmy Carr is, go look him up on the internet. He is a brilliant comedian. He's so witty, so freaking funny. His laugh is out of this world. And he said something on a podcast once, and it just stuck with me. And it was, you've got to go with what you got or don't go at all. And when I heard that, I thought, radical self-acceptance, radical self-ownership. You've got to go with what you've got or don't go at all. And I fucking love that. That is radically accepting where you currently are, what you've currently got, and then to move forward with it. So something that I talk about with a lot of my clients, and I've done big presentations on this around clean health, is especially when it comes to setting goals, right? We all have a goal, or most of us, especially if you're listening to me, a goal of being a better version of yourself, taking yourself to the next level, going all in. I'm sure some of us, or not all of us, if not all of us, have said some version of that. And really what we're saying to ourselves is, I want to step into myself. I want to see what I'm capable of achieving. I want to overcome this fear of playing small. That is a really beautiful part of self-leadership and ownership. But when we just place it out there into the world and we don't have that understanding of what it is, then it's very hard to step into that. So a part of knowing where we are in our current space, right, to go with what we've got, we have to understand what our current level of resources is, right? What are the tools that we already have? What are the tools that we need to be a better version of ourselves? Right? Do we need to look at the people that we spend our time with, right? We are a version of the people that we spend our time with, our most time with. Are we practicing standards? Or are we negotiating with them? Are we living in expectation or are we practicing standards? Like, where are we at with our own standard of ourselves? Where are we at in terms of the time that we have available? Where are we at in terms of what this goal means for me? What do I need to learn about myself so that I can be a better version of myself? Tony Robbins says this thing, which is, if you're not learning, you're growing. Tony Robbins says a version that if you're not growing, you're dying. Now, that's a pretty bold statement to say. If you're not learning or if you're not growing, you're essentially dying. And again, we take our own version of that. And my version of that, when I hear that, is essentially we actually never stay the same. The body specifically never stays the same. It is either building or breaking down. And it will break down faster than it builds. That's why it's so much easier to lose muscle than it is to build it, right? And if we want to build muscle, we have to keep what? Keep working at a high intensity. We have to keep challenging the muscle. When we aren't taking action towards the better version of ourselves, when we're not challenging ourselves, when we're not learning about ourselves, when we're not learning in general, when we're not doing hard things, when we're not practicing or developing willpower or skill or anything like that, then we think we're just staying the same. But really, there's things happening in the background subconsciously, which is we keep embedding that we don't need to change. We keep embedding maybe belief systems that are continuing to hold us back. Right? So if there's areas in our life where we notice that we have quite a fixed mindset around things, this is a conversation I had with my girls this morning around the fixed versus growth mindset. A lot of people will just fall to the expectation or the acceptance that I am how I am. This is how I've always been. This is who I am. This is I can't be changed. That's not possible. I'm fatally flawed. No one can help me. I've tried this in the past and it was always the same. I hear that a lot. And that is the negative part of the self-acceptance, which is you're telling yourself that you cannot change. And that becomes the blunt or the wall to any self-development. Because the truth is, everyone with effort, with intention, can transform or improve or evolve. And when we recognize and understand that we have this thing called neuroplasticity, which we can change our brain, we can change our brain through changing our belief systems, through using different language, changing our language, becoming aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, our words, our behaviors, the thoughts we choose to keep. We don't have to stay the same if we don't want to. We can change. We can evolve. We can step into the better version of ourselves. And it's not easy. When we practice being the better version of ourselves, it's hard. Remember, we are forcing ourselves to change. We are removing the comfort of how we used to be. We are practicing shifting the behaviors that no longer serve us. Like saying it out loud is one, actioning it is another. Right? So when we have the growth mindset that we can accept where we are in this moment, but not that we can't change, we can do something with it. We can become incredibly empowered by the ways in which we want to evolve. And it's really important that we get clear on what that is. Right? Where are we at now? Where are we at in our skills, in our time, in our relationship with others, with ourselves, with our careers, right? With our relationship to training, nutrition, our habits, the words we use for ourselves, the skills that we currently have, where are we at with that? And if I was to be a little bit better than the version I am of today, what is the one thing that I would practice doing? What is the one skill or habit What is the thing I will say to myself every morning that I wake up and I look in the mirror that is going to remind me that I am the most powerful person in my life, that I am going to practice being the better version of myself, right? So that ownership and that radical responsibility or that radical self-acceptance of who we are in this moment allows us to become the better version, to always be learning, to own and honor who we are, especially the moments or the parts of us that are challenging. And I almost think that radical self-acceptance is almost the number one thing we need to do before we take responsibility, before we go into leadership, before we look at what is the resources that we need to practice, that we need more of, right? A lot of it comes down to capacity. How do we build our own capacity when it comes to self-regulation, to even stress management? So when we look at those pillars, which is radical responsibility, radical self-ownership, or radical self-acceptance, radical self-leadership, and radical resourcefulness, they all work together, but it's almost like the self-acceptance has to come first, right? In order to take responsibility for who we are, we have to radically accept who we are, that we want to be the better version, right? And then we look at who do we want to surround ourselves with? What is the type of environment that we want to be around so that we keep learning, right? That's a resource. Podcasts are a resource. Coaches are resources. Our friends, our partners, these are all resources. And what we want to make sure that we're doing as well is the people that we're spending our time with, they have the same pillars. And what a really cool exercise for you all to do, and I got my girls to do this too, is get really clear on what the pillars are for you. So the pillars, radical responsibility, radical self-acceptance, or radical self-ownership, radical self-leadership, radical resourcefulness, they all have a habit. They all have like an identity that we can associate ourselves with. And for you, it's important that you understand what that is so that each day that you are reviewing and reflecting on yourself and how you're showing up in good moments, in challenging moments, that you go, at the end of the day, I exercise such leadership. I exercised radical responsibility. I exercised ownership today. I owned who I was in a moment where my people-pleasing part wanted to step in. Right? That ownership is the ability to speak boundaries, to speak what feels true for you without dismissing others. And I think there's such an ability in how we can share what our experience is for others while hearing someone else's experience and being okay that they're different. In fact, that is a really big sign of high intelligence, which is the ability to recognize that someone may not have the same belief system as you, the same experience as you, right, the same path as you. And instead of criticizing them because they're different, you can either lean in with curiosity, which we want to do even to ourselves when we recognize that we're being split in the middle between different versions of ourselves that want to show up, right? We can come up with judgment, and then judgment gives us shame and guilt, right, or whatever else that comes along with that. Or we can lean in with curiosity, right? And the beautiful thing about knowing and owning who we are is that we don't bend for others. We don't bend our standards for the people around us that don't have our same standards. And it's okay, they don't have to, but they're probably not the people that you're going to hang around. Right? You get to lead yourself in how you show up as a mom, a dad, in your career, as a coach, as a friend, and just as a human being, right? Moving through life, trying to experience and learn as much as you can. So that thing around getting to know ourselves, right? The thing around self-development, the reason we ask ourselves questions is so that we can continue to refine who we are, gently, subtly, and with compassion. And something else we want to practice while we move through these versions of ourselves, while we practice this radicalness is, can we do it from love? Can we do it from love and not from lack? Can we do it from the version of ourselves that is going to come from love? Can we notice when we feel that sense of unworthiness? Can we notice when we have that part of us that we're wrestling with, that we're trying to shift from trying to be someone else to owning who we are? Can we try and wrap her with love? Can we try and match the insides to match the outsides? As we move through this roller coaster of developing ourselves through all the years and the seasons that we're going to be exposed to, can we always fall back on love? Can we always fall back on self-care? Can we always fall back on compassion? Right? Compassion is our ability to recognize or sit in suffering and still move forward, still take action. And that's a really important thing, because as we develop the better version of ourselves, we start to, have these standards. And a lot of you here have really high standards, and we love those parts of you. She helps you be an incredible woman. But when she's met with no compassion at all, when it's unrelenting and it has no flexibility in there, she doesn't know how to adapt to different circumstances, then we recognize that what will come up is the self-bullying. And then we're no longer doing high achieving, right? We're just self-bullying. So why it's really important that we get clear on what these things mean, what these pillars mean, is because we want to know exactly what we need to practice. And when we come back to the version of ourselves that needs to reflect and say, hey, am I doing a good job or not? How am I showing up when things feel hard? We can help ourselves recognize when we are exercising leadership. And then what do we know? We recognize that we're actually teaching others to do the same. When people notice that you're showing up differently, that's that show, don't tell. Like, you don't have to tell the world what you're doing. In fact, most people that are shouting it out to the rooftops aren't really doing it behind closed doors. They're only doing it when people want them to see it. But where we develop evidence about ourselves that we are who we say we are, and that becomes fucking powerful, is that we don't need an audience to do it. We are self-leading in the dark. And that's the thing about radical self-acceptance, is it's done in the darkness. It's done in the quietness. It's done when no one's watching. It's done in our thoughts, right? When we show up, when we look in the mirror. Are we naming, blaming, shaming? Or are we looking ourselves in the mirror and going, there's another day that I'm going to be devoted to you. Here's another day that I'm going to practice forward. Here's another day that I'm going to practice doing the best that I can. Here's a day where I want to be conscious about who I am and how I show up and how I talk to myself. Now, even when we say these things to ourselves and we have that purest of intention, we are going to be met at times where the easiest thing and the reflexive thing to do, or reactive thing to do, is to self-criticize first. But as long as we can name and notice it and turn that dial down and go, okay, I'm noticing I'm speaking to myself that way. It's not really helpful. It feels easier to say that because we've got a negative bias, but I'm going to start to shift and change my language. I'm going to ask myself, what can I practice in this moment? How would the better version of myself show up right now? What would love look like? What would love do? What would a leader who I'm enrolled by say to me in this moment? Right? What would compassion look like here? How can I hold myself in my suffering, but not for too long? And what would I like to learn from how I'm showing up right now? What do I still need to improve on? What are the resources that I have available in this moment? Right? And so much of this comes down to what's the capacity that we have. Right? We all might notice that when capacity is lower, sharpness is high. And what I mean by that is the language is sharp. It moves from regulated, steady curiosity into, I can't believe you did that. Why can't you? That type of language gets really sharp. And when we can notice that happens, we can name it, tame it, reframe it. Right? Reframe it into a different version and take action on it. Turn down the intensity of the somatics, what we're feeling in the body. Right? Now we've got a little bit more regulation. So when we think about or we talk about things like discipline, when we're looking at women who exercise such high leadership, self-leadership, which we're all enrolled by, a lot of their ability to do that comes from their ability to build capacity within themselves, to be able to stay within their window, right? So not get too high or too low. Regulate before they'd make a decision. Regulate before they decision make, right? That's really easy to remember. So some homework for you guys to do, and I'd love to hear from you, please, is I want you to write out the pillars. You might have your own version of what these pillars are for self-development, but these are hands down my favorite pillars, and I hear other people talking about them all the time. And I've been teaching these for about 10 years, and trust me, they are life-changing. I want you to get really clear on what radical responsibility is to you. I also want you to get really clear on what radical self-acceptance means and feels like for you. And I want you to ask yourself, how does that feel to radically accept who you are? To stop and go, I am going to stop blaming others, going to stop blaming circumstance, going to stop trying to compare myself to everyone else around me who have different seasons, different lifestyles, and I'm seeing a version of them that they want me to see. How does it feel to stop and accept who I am so that now I have this beautiful foundation to create a better version of me? That I now, in this moment, have created a garden of growth. That now by radically accepting who I am, owning who I am, the parts of me that I love, the parts of me that I still am challenged by, the parts of me that I still want to work on and get curious around, right, and learn from. Wow, how does that feel? Because I remember the moment that I did that. And it was the start of a great beginning. It was where I could really do something with it. And it's so powerful. And it starts with the decision, that decision to own. And we don't just want to own it. We want to get to know it, right? We want to get to know it. We want to feel it. We want to embody it. And then we want to get a little bit excited, right? Even if you feel like you are so far away from a version of yourself that you're really proud of, guess what? You can be her, but you're going to be a better version of her. Because the version of you maybe might have looked better than what you are now. Maybe she had more time. Maybe she had more discipline. I would say it was probably more capacity. You can get back there, but better. Because the way in which you're going to go there is going to have a standard. It's going to have ownership. It's going to have radical responsibility. It's not going to be all or nothing. She's going to have compassion. She's still going to have her high standards. But you are going to be able to create an even better version, a more solid version, a more sustainable version of that. And the even better thing about this is that you're going to keep learning about her. Because instead of slapping her with expectation, instead of slapping her with this unrelenting, unfair expectation, you are going to keep noticing, what do I need to learn to be better? Wow, this version of me feels amazing. I wonder what I can do over here. I never want to stop learning about myself. I never want to stop growing. Where in my life do I notice that I have a deep growth mindset where actually this whole thing feels so freaking exciting? I'm adventurous. I'm playful. I ask how to practice. I want feedback. Where in my life can I practice that, and where can I start to let that leak? In lots of areas of my life, and where do I still feel a little bit fixed? a lot of the fixed mindset stuff comes from a lot of deep self-belief challenges. For a lot of the women that I work with, it's deep rooted in the inverted commas failures, because their belief around not getting it right is failing. But really it is a version of practicing. But because they didn't get back on the horse, they've stopped and collected evidence that I just failed. Right? So where in our life do we notice that we still have that story around I'm fatally flawed, no one can help me, I'm a failure, I can't do it. Every time I eat carbs, I gain weight, and so I can't eat carbs. Like, that's a fixed mindset. I have to exercise this amount, but I love training. We all love training, but we also love results even more. Where in our life do we notice that we tell these stories that put us in a box that we can't get out of? That is a part of radical ownership. That is a part of radical responsibility. When we own and recognize and become responsible for the stories that we've told ourselves, for being where we are in this moment, guess what? You're not fixed there either. You can change it, but you have to be responsible. Take the responsibility. Don't blame anyone else. And when you take responsibility, you go, all right, what am I going to do with it? Literally, ladies, the world is your oyster. And when I'm referring to your world, I'm talking about your world within yourself. You can, if you really deeply care, create a really incredible version of yourself, a version of yourself that is waiting to be met by you. Oh, that is just so freaking exciting. There is a version of you that you haven't even met yet. You can meet her with these pillars. You can meet her by exercising that. You can meet her by being around other women that practice this too, right? Being in a community of other women that get it. You can do that. And for some of you, you may not have that community, but you're going to build it within yourself. You can create the garden. The garden's in here. The garden's in here, right? We need to water it. We need to have good quality soil. We need to feed it well. It needs a bit of sunlight and needs to be able to weather the storms, right? You can become your own garden, right? That's what self-care and self-nurture is. So I hope today's call got you thinking a little bit. Maybe it got you a little bit emotional. I notice that a lot of the times that I speak about these things and I think about my experience of how I've been in the past and where I am now, it does make me a little bit emotional, because it's almost like our rite of passage as a human being to have these really challenging experiences. And it is just a part of self-developing. And as long as we remind ourselves that we are not fixed, that we can rewire our brain, that we can choose more powerful language, that we can notice what the previous beliefs are and make versions of ourselves that we can believe is true, right? Because whether we think we can or we can't, we are right. That all comes down to what we believe. And we're not limited by our resources. We're limited by the ceiling of our self-belief. So if we can break that ceiling, knock it down, create a bigger building, right? A taller one, a better house, right, that we live in, we then get to experience a greater version of ourselves, right? No one's perfect. I am not. All these things that I share with you, I'm practicing in all different ways. And guess what? They show up in all different new levels. But we get better at it. We get better at becoming the captain, not so much the passenger. We can turn up or turn down the dial. We know how to shift the gears, right? We practice that adaptability. We don't have to start again Monday. We pick ourselves up as soon as we notice, I'm doing that thing. We have a quick turnaround time. We've got quick feedback loops. Right? And these are the skills when we talk about resources, radical resourcefulness. This is what I'm talking about. I'm helping you develop them for yourself. But the only way that we can develop resources is with practice. So if you don't get it right the first time, all you're doing is learning. All right, ladies, I hope you have a wonderful day, an amazing week. Please reach out if you need me. And if you absolutely love this podcast, please let me know. Like it, share it amongst your friends, reach out to me, and please make sure you've subscribed to the Hattie Boydell episode or Hattie Boydell podcast. Have a wonderful week, ladies. Remember, we have two hands, one for helping ourselves, one for helping others.